I think there's a sense of paralyzing fear that can come up for many parents, which is this resistance to diagnosis, to labels. And no one wants to have their child labeled or be prejudged or called the problem kid or the hyper kid, or just to be known for being different. It seems to be this thing that is so feared. And it's not about the diagnosis, it's about the understanding. So what a diagnosis can do is it can give you this, it can offer this space for you to accept your child. And I may have just thrown a bunch of people for a loop by saying that, accepting your child, because we're taught not to accept certain types of behavior. And when you see behavior that you don't understand and that doesn't make sense to you and just doesn't seem like logical, it's really easy to get frustrated and feel like the only answer is, how do I stop this and change it immediately? This is so not how it's supposed to be. They're supposed to be X, Y, Z. This is a problem, because what is happening is you're getting stuck, or we're getting stuck on the diagnosis and the fear of difference. In reality, your child probably knows that they're different. And if they're an adult, they probably feel that too. So there's no spoilers here. Everyone knows if so-and-so's constantly getting reprimanded by the teacher, or, scowled at and harped at by the parent for forgetting the backpack or not doing what they said they were supposed to do, right? That understanding is already present. But what's missing is the understanding for these behaviors or challenges. And so a diagnosis can help bring closure to what is really going on, and it can be explained to you in a language hopefully that you can understand, and a language that's going to direct you to resources and support. And sometimes these diagnoses allow for individualized education plans, which means that your child would get the support that they need to excel. So, what happens when we don't get the diagnosis and we keep our head buried in the sand? Nothing gets better. And your child or yourself doesn't get that understanding or ability to advocate clearly what's going on. Likely you're just sitting there feeling like a failure as a parent, going, why can't I get it together? Why is it so easy for everyone else to get their kids to do X, Y, Z, but for me it's a bloody headache every time. I'm ready to pull my hair out, or why am I getting calls from the school on the regular, right? So that's the benefit of a diagnosis. It's an explanation for what you're going through. And when we get that explanation and we understand, there's a reason for this, it's a lot easier to get on board with the supports. So there's action that needs to be taken with the diagnosis. And it's not just medication. No one has to you don't have to medicate your kid. Because they have a diagnosis does not mean medication. For me, it's so important. When I was a teacher, I'd always want to know if a child had a diagnosis, not so I could prejudge them, but so that I could prepare for them. So I would know immediately to expect to see some odd things in their behavior, and to be prepared to be flexible, because that is absolutely what is required with many diagnoses. We need to be flexible, and we need to prepare for whatever needs will show up. They're likely to be unique. And so that prepares me to be flexible, be adaptable. And also it gives me a heads up of, there's a lot of strategies that we can use. So there's phrasing I wouldn't use with a neurotypical child as I would with an ADHD child. I wouldn't ask them to do 3 tasks in a row. I'd start with one, go get your boots. The yellow boots under your bag. Yep, they're right there. Grab your boots. Yep, grab your boots, right? It's repeat, 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 and it's one task. If I were to try and say, get your boots and your backpack and go get your lunch, this child's going to be spinning or lost somewhere, and it's likely going to be frustrating, and you're likely to lose your cool. It's also more likely for teachers to lose their cool. So when we don't have an explanation for behavior, it's very hard to advocate for our child. And not just advocate at school or with family members, but even for yourself. Sometimes it can be so soothing to understand that it's not your child trying to drive you crazy. They seriously, their brain is functioning differently, and it's having a functioning issue. And so sometimes that can really help a parent or person in that person's life be like, oh, okay, like maybe let's not read into that in that horrible way. Let's call it what it is. And then from there, you can look at yourself and look at the person and go, what's a realistic action here? What's a realistic way to relate? What can I expect? Or how do I need to shift in my approach? These things are really hard to do for a lot of people, is monitoring our own behavior. So these diagnoses usually require us to self-regulate and to change the way that we do things. And if I say change, who is like, yeah, sweet, love change, I'm on board, I'm always down for change. It's always easier said than done, right? And having to adjust our expectations, not a piece of cake, not easy. It's something that does take time. And so I can see why these steps are really scary for people. And I can empathize that people don't want to be labeled, because neither do I. No one wants that. It's not nice. And the name for ADHD sucks, because it doesn't accurately represent the diversity that comes with it and how unique each person's symptoms are and how they manifest for each individual person in family life. So, I do think it sucks, but regardless of it, it opens doors for support, for adaptations, for clarity, for understanding. And I think the worst thing in the world about having ADHD is being misunderstood and being seen as lazy and careless or rude, right? Or violent or aggressive. It's just being able to speak to that more intelligently is very empowering for everyone. And it also offers us the language to train the children or the person with the neurodiverse functions how to navigate them. There's awareness that needs to be trained, and it takes time, right? Repetition is so key. You're going to have to repeat and repeat and repeat and repeat. And I find that one behavior change can sometimes take up to a year for someone with a neurodiverse brain. So repetition is key. You might not see results for a while, but then all of a sudden, like one day, there's a click and it switches. So the personal awareness and development is a huge factor. And for the individuals to be learning about how their brains function, the strengths, the challenges, and things to be aware of. Those conversations are very, very important. So this brings me back to the beginning, which is a diagnosis is not all about medication. It's not so we can label your child. It's so that we can make sure you and your child are getting the support that you need. And the truth is you don't need a diagnosis, if that's what you're fearful of, to get support for your child. I'll repeat that. You do not need a diagnosis to treat your child's ADHD functions. Medication is an option and it's a way, and you can get that with a diagnosis. They can offer you the medication. You now have like the green card of access if that is something that you so choose to obtain. But you do not need a diagnosis to work with specialists on how to work with your ADHD brained child. And I think the support is the most important thing for the parent, for the family member, and for the person who has a neurodiverse brain. I think that's one of the most profound solutions, is like teaching them this is a big part of you. This is a big part of what you're going to face and how you're going to experience life. So it's really important, I believe, to get on board with that, learn about what's going to happen or what is happening, get clear on like how it shows up for you, and adapt your lifestyle to support it so that you can be optimized and get the most out of work, relationship, career. We got to learn this stuff as soon as possible. So I definitely would recommend that if a diagnosis is something you're afraid of, don't worry about it. No sweat. Take your time, but don't take your time in accessing support for you and your family and your child. I think that is absolutely essential, because the reality is I think you all already know if you're suspecting it and you're you've got the stories to share it. You've already self-diagnosed, and the most important thing about that diagnosis is the understanding and the application of strategic adaptations to support the functions of your child or yourself, because it's likely you and others in the family have ADD or ADHD, or you are neurodiverse and someone in your family is, if your child is. So that can have all kinds of different challenges in itself. But again, that's going to help probably everyone to learn more about the functions of the brain and get on board with the adaptations that are going to make life easier for everyone and help everyone do better at the end of the day.